The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly above, its surface alive with swirling colors that reflected the emotions of 1,000 different alien species. Ambassador Jiwon Park walked steadily across the polished floor, her black uniform crisp against the alien architecture surrounding her. Each step echoed in the vast chamber as hundreds of eyes, sensors, and unknown organs tracked her movement. She had been summoned here today, but she already knew why. The whispers had been growing louder across the galaxy for months. Humanity was becoming a problem. The elevated platforms rose like metallic flowers around the chamber's center, each one housing representatives from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Some floated in antigrav fields. Others stood on mechanical legs that clicked against their platforms. A few existed as pure energy contained within crystalline matrices. High Arbiter Valthera of the Zephyrian Collective rose first, her body shimmering like liquid mercury caught in starlight. When she spoke, her voice carried the harmony of wind chimes mixed with distant thunder. Ambassador Park, we have called you here because humanity has become increasingly difficult to manage. Jiwon kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt the familiar burn of irritation. Manage, as if humans were pets that had forgotten their training. You traitors, Valthara continued, her form rippling with displeasure, refused to follow established commercial protocols. Just last week, Captain Seojin Kim ignored quarantine procedures on Nexus Prime and delivered medical supplies directly to plague victims. This violated 17 different safety regulations. A chorus of agreement emanated from the insectoid Confederation's platform, their chittering voices creating a sound like rain on metal. Their representative, a creature that looked like a praying mantis crossed with a spider, gestured with 4 arms simultaneously. Human explorers show similar disregard for boundaries. They enter restricted systems claiming humanitarian missions or scientific curiosity. Most recently, Commander Hejin's Song led her team into the dead zone to rescue survivors from a crashed freighter, despite our explicit warnings about spatial anomalies. The massive collective Queen Ode dominated the largest platform, her bulbous form pulsing with patterns of red and orange bioluminescence. When she communicated, it was through direct neural transmission that felt like ice water flowing through everyone's minds. Your species lacks proper hierarchy. Your diplomats refuse to show appropriate deference to elder races. Speak to us as equals rather than acknowledging our superior age and wisdom. Juwan stepped forward, her boots clicking on the crystal floor. The sound seemed to cut through the various alien communications like a blade. Honored representatives, I think. There's been a fundamental misunderstanding here. Misunderstanding? The voice came from the shadows of Platform 7, where the ancient ethereals maintained their mysterious presence. They appeared as shifting clouds of dark matter occasionally lit by internal lightning. Your species has been part of our galactic community for only 2 centuries. You are children playing among adults. Children who have contributed more to galactic stability than most species accomplish in millennia. Juwan replied, her voice carrying a steel edge that made several representatives shift uncomfortably. Our scientists ended the Red Plague that was devastating the Outer Rim. Our engineers designed the atmospheric processors that saved the Aquarian homeworld. Our doctors have enough. The roar came from Counselor Threxmer of the Dominion. Hegemony, a hulking creature that looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a tank and given it anger management issues. His platform shook under his weight as he slammed a fist the size of a small vehicle against his podium. Your people have grown soft and arrogant. You think your brief period of peace has made you important? Threxmer's red eyes glowed like hot coals as he leaned forward. When you first joined our community, you knew your place. You were grateful for our protection, respectful of our authority. Now, you act as if you belong at the same table as races that ruled the stars when your world was still covered in ice. The chamber erupted in voices, clicks, harmonics, and mental broadcasts as representatives voiced their agreement. The cacophony was overwhelming, like being inside a malfunctioning universal translator during a riot. G1 stood perfectly, still in the center of it all, waiting. She had learned long ago that sometimes the best response was silence. Let them reveal their true feelings. High Arbiter Valthera raised her arms, and the chamber gradually quieted. The decision has been made, Ambassador Park. Humanity's expansion rights are hereby revoked. All human colonial efforts will cease immediately. Your trade agreements are suspended pending a full review of your species' compliance with galactic law. Most importantly, all human activities beyond your current territory will require council oversight and approval. The gavel, an ancient device from the first galactic civilization, fell with a sound like a star-going supernova. The decision was final. Carved into galactic law with the authority of beings who had ruled space lanes when humanity was still discovering fire. For a long moment, Giwan said nothing. She looked around the chamber, meeting whatever passed 4 eyes among the assembled aliens. Some looked smug, others appeared satisfied, and a few seemed almost apologetic. Finally, she spoke, her voice so quiet that the chamber's acoustic systems had to amplify it. "You're making a mistake," Threxmer snorted, a sound like a steam engine exploding. "Is that a threat, little human?" Guan's expression didn't change, but those familiar with human body language noticed her hands had moved to rest behind her back. A position that suggested she was restraining herself from doing something she might regret. "No, Counselor. It's an observation. My people chose peace because we believed in something better. We chose cooperation because we thought the galaxy had evolved beyond the need for ... older solutions." She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. "But understand this. We chose peace. We weren't forced into it. We weren't conquered into it. We made a decision, and we can make a different one." The warning hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Most of the council dismissed it as empty posturing from a species that had grown too comfortable in their protected status. They had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous humans were the ones who spoke the softest. As Guan walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence, she paused at the threshold. Without turning around, she spoke. One final sentence that would be recorded in galactic history: "Don't make us remember what we used to be." The great doors sealed behind her with a sound like thunder, leaving the council to contemplate what they had just done. None of them realized they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The ancient data crystals hummed softly as young Xylorian historian Zedric's tentacles danced across the access ports. His bioluminescent patches flickered with excitement as layer after layer of classified information unfolded before his compound eyes. The Thousand Worlds University's deepest archives held secrets that would make most galactic citizens lose sleep for months. What he was discovering would change everything, he thought. He knew about the galaxy's recent history. The official records painted a simple picture. The Vorthan Empire had been a terrible threat that was eventually defeated through the combined efforts of the galactic community. But the classified files told a very different story. One that explained why the elder races seemed so nervous whenever humans were mentioned in private. Conversations. 237 years ago, the Vorthan Empire had emerged from the dark spaces between galactic arms like a nightmare made real. Their ships were grotesque fusions of metal and living tissue, breathing vessels that consumed raw matter and converted it into more warriors, more weapons, more death. They didn't just conquer worlds, they devoured them, leaving behind empty husks, drifting in space. The Vorthan warriors themselves were walking horrors. Genetically engineered for one purpose: endless war. Standing 8 feet tall with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, their exoskeletons could deflect most energy weapons. They felt no fear, knew no mercy, and their hive-like society made retreat impossible. When a Vorthan army landed on a planet, the only outcomes were total victory or complete extinction. Zedric's patches dimmed as he read the casualty reports. The Centauri Alliance, 17 systems consumed in 3 months. The Peaceful Syndicate, their entire pacifist civilization, turned into biomass for Vorthan ships. The proud warrior clans of Arcturus, defeated so thoroughly that their survivors still refused to speak of the battles. The established galactic powers had responded exactly as expected. The Zephyrian Collective formed a committee for strategic response. The Dominion hegemony created a war planning council. The ethereals retreated into meditation to consider all possibilities. Meanwhile, the Vorthons consumed 3 more star systems. That's when humanity entered the picture. Earth had been a spacefaring civilization for barely 50 years. Their ships were crude metal boxes powered by fusion reactors that other species considered museum pieces. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles and primitive energy beams. All galactic standards. They were technological infants playing with toys. But Captain Minho Kim didn't wait for committees or councils. When news of the Vorthon advance reached Earth, he gathered every ship that could carry a weapon and every volunteer willing to die far from home. 17 converted cargo vessels, 40,000 humans who had never seen real combat. The Vorthons sent a scouting force of 50 biomechanical cruisers against Kim's ragtag fleet. They expected to add human genetic material to their next generation of warriors. Instead, they discovered that humans fight differently than anyone else in the galaxy, while other species treated space combat like a formal duel with rules and honor. Humans treated it like a street fight, where the only rule was survival. Captain Do-Yin Park rammed his damaged freighter directly into a Vorthon flagship, detonating his fusion reactor on impact. Lieutenant Minji Choi used her ship's mining lasers to slice through enemy formations like a blade through paper. Commander Jung Ho Lee programmed automated cargo haulers to fly straight into Vorthon ships and explode. The Vorthons had never encountered kamikaze tactics. Their hive mind psychology couldn't comprehend enemies who would willingly destroy themselves to achieve victory. For the first time in their species' history, a Vorthon force retreated. But humans were just getting started. Colonel Sun Mi Lee became a legend during the siege of Kepler 442, when conventional weapons failed to break the Vorthon blockade. She created something the galaxy had never seen: psychological warfare designed specifically for a hive mind species. She fabricated video footage showing captured Vorthon warriors being slowly dissected while still alive, their screams broadcasting on frequencies that resonated through the enemy's shared consciousness. The footage was completely fake. Humans had actually been treating Vorthon prisoners according to galactic conventions, but the Vorthon's hive mind made it impossible to distinguish between real and fabricated experiences. The terror spread through their entire fleet like a virus, causing the first mass surrender in Vorthon history as the war escalated. Humans revealed tactics that horrified even their allies. They strapped nuclear warheads to asteroids and hurled them at Vorthon shipyards. They released computer viruses that turned enemy ships against each other. They developed weapons that specifically targeted Vorthon biological components. Dying metal tombs, Major Wanho Shin's squadron perfected the art of ghost attacks using stealth technology to appear behind enemy lines, strike without warning, and vanish before retaliation was possible. The Vorthons started calling human ships shadow demons and developed an almost superstitious fear of empty space. The final battle came when Admiral Sul-Ji Yoon led the combined human fleet against the Vorthon home system instead of a direct assault. She surrounded the entire star system with automated weapon platforms and simply waited. When Vorthon ships tried to break out, they were destroyed. When they tried to communicate, humans jammed their frequencies. For 6 months, the most feared empire in galactic history was trapped in their own home, slowly starving. The surrender document was signed by the Vorthon Prime War leader himself, the first time in their species' 12,000-year history that they had admitted defeat. The war was over, and humanity had saved the galaxy. But what happened next surprised everyone. Even more than the victory itself, humanity voluntarily dismantled their most devastating weapons. They converted their warships into exploration vessels and their soldiers into teachers and diplomats. They chose peace not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to build something better than endless conflict. The galaxy was so relieved that the nightmare was over. They gradually forgot the details of how it had ended. Races found it easier to remember humans as peaceful contributors rather than the terrifying warriors who had accomplished what no other species could manage. But deep in the archives, the truth waited patiently for someone curious enough to look for it. And now, Young Zedric understood why the Council's decision to restrict. Commander Jaeon Choi's console blinked, like angry eyes, as emergency signals flooded in from across the Kepler reach. His coffee cup rattled against the metal desk as the research vessel Harmony's edge shuddered through hyperspace, racing toward coordinates that should have been safe human territory. "Sir, we're getting multiple distress calls," reported Communications Officer Hyugi Nam, her voice tight with worry. "Collective ships, lots of them, demanding immediate evacuation." Jaeyoon's jaw clenched. Collective were testing the Council's new restrictions already, less than a week after the vote. These weren't random raiders or pirates. This was an organized probe to see what humanity would do when cornered. The final transmission from Colony Administrator Uniso crackled through the ship's speakers, heavy with static and resignation. "Collective ships incoming. 12 heavy cruisers, maybe more behind them. But this is our home, damn it. Una, out." Then silence. 18 hours. Later, the collective fleet arrived to claim their prize like vultures descending on a corpse. The Queen Node's massive bioship collective consciousness drifted through the asteroid field, its living hull pulsing with satisfied bioluminescence. Smaller vessels spread out like hungry insects, their sensors probing every corner of the abandoned human settlements. Subcommander Jexhai extended his consciousness through the hive mind. Asterisk, the humans fled without resistance. Their weaknesses confirmed. These mining stations will provide excellent raw materials for our expansion. Asterisk. But something felt wrong. The colonies were empty, yes, but they were also completely intact. No signs of hasty evacuation, no abandoned equipment, no damage to the facilities. It was as if 30,000 humans had simply vanished into space, taking only what they could carry but leaving everything else. It was perfectly organized. That's when the broadcast began. Every communication array in the sector suddenly activated simultaneously, projecting a single message across all frequencies. The voice was calm, measured, and utterly human. "You have 72 hours to withdraw from all human territories before we respond appropriately. This is not a threat. This is a schedule." The transmission repeated every hour, exactly on the hour, with mechanical precision that made the collective drones shift nervously in their biopods. Admiral Dung Yuksong's name appeared in the message header, but most of the younger collective had never heard of him. The Queen Node, however, remembered, deep in her ancient memory banks. Stored alongside battle tactics from wars fought before most current species had discovered fire, lay fragments of data from the Vorthon conflict. Images of human ships appearing out of nowhere. Recordings of impossible tactics that defied every law of civilized warfare. And a name that had once struck terror into enemy fleets, Admiral Song, the Shadow Admiral, who had commanded humanity's most feared stealth squadrons, but that was over 2 centuries ago. Surely the humans had grown soft in their years of peace, as the deadline approached. Sensor ghosts at the edge of their detection range, contacts that appeared for split seconds before vanishing completely. The abandoned mining equipment began moving in patterns that made no tactical sense, repositioning itself as if guided by invisible hands. Even the asteroid seemed to be slowly shifting position, though that should have been impossible. Drone Captain Velmuth's bioship Hungry Maw investigated one of the larger asteroids. What it found instead was a perfectly spherical cavity in the asteroid's center, lined with materials that shouldn't exist in nature. Asterisk, Queenode, Velmuth transmitted through the hive mind. Asterisk, this asteroid has been hollowed out and reinforced. There are power signatures inside, but our sensors cannot penetrate the shielding. Asterisk, the revelation sent shockwaves through the collective consciousness. If the humans had been modifying asteroids, what else had they been preparing during their supposed years of peaceful mining? With 24 hours left on the countdown, the collective's most advanced sensor array, a biological construct, the size of a small moon, finally detected something that made the Quinn Node's massive heart skip a beat. Hidden among the asteroids, cloaked by technology that bent light itself, were energy. signatures that matched weapons from the classified archives of the Vorthon War, weapons that had once turned entire enemy fleets into scrap metal and floating corpses. Impossible, the Queen Ode broadcast to her fleet. Asterisk, those weapons were supposed to have been destroyed. The treaties clearly stated, asterisk, the countdown hit 6 hours remaining, and suddenly the collective sensors went completely insane. Contacts appeared everywhere at once, hundreds of them, thousands more ships than should have been possible to hide in the entire sector. The signatures matched no known human vessel designs, which meant they were either completely new or so heavily modified that their original forms were unrecognizable. Sub-Commander Jex High's drone ship suddenly found itself surrounded by objects that his sensors insisted weren't there. His bioship's living hull began secreting stress hormones, responding to threats that its primitive nervous system could sense but not identify. Asterisk, we need to leave, he transmitted, his mental voice shaking with barely controlled panic. Asterisk, something is very wrong here. Humans are not what we thought they were. Asterisk, the Queen Ode's ancient memories supplied fragmentary images of human tactics from the old war. Ships that appeared behind enemy lines without warning. Weapons that seemed to think for themselves. Battles where human forces appeared to be completely outmatched until the moment they revealed what they had really been planning all along. With 5 hours and 37 minutes remaining on the human countdown, the evacuation order went out. Across the entire collective fleet, asterisk all vessels, immediate withdrawal. Priority Alpha evacuation protocols. Do not engage. Do not investigate. Leave the sector now. Asterisk, as the bioships fled toward the edge of the system. Their living hulls pulsing with shame and confusion, space began to shimmer around the asteroid field. Captain Young-Ho Park's stealth squadron materialized like ghosts, becoming solid, their ships emerging from hiding places that should have been too small to contain them. All units stand down, Park's voice carried across the tactical frequencies. The point has been made. Turn to patrol status. One by one, the human ships vanished back into whatever impossible hiding places they had emerged from. The asteroid stopped moving. The sensor ghost disappeared. Within minutes, the Kepler Reach looked exactly like an ordinary mining sector again, but across the galaxy. Every major power had been monitoring the situation through their own intelligence networks. The footage of collective ships fleeing in, apparent terror from an empty system spread through diplomatic channels like wildfire. Species that had forgotten why their ancestors once spoke of humanity in hushed, respectful tones began to remember. The humans hadn't grown soft during their centuries of peace. They had simply learned to hide their true nature so well that everyone else had forgotten what lay beneath the surface. In the highest levels of galactic government, emergency sessions were called. Intelligence reports were frantically reviewed. And slowly, a terrible understanding began to dawn. Humanity had never been the peaceful, harmless species they pretended to be. They had simply been waiting for someone to give them a reason to remember what they used to be. The test was over, and the collective had failed it spectacularly. But more importantly, they had awakened something that the galaxy had hoped would remain forever dormant. The humans were back. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 1,000 species filled the crystalline chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that would have driven most beings insane. But Intelligence Director Su Young Han stood calmly at the center of it all, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic displays that were tearing apart 2 centuries of galactic assumptions. Silence. High Arbiter Velthera's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Her translucent form shimmered with agitation as she gestured toward the human woman. Explain these ... accusations. ... Su Yang touched her wrist device. And the air above the assembly exploded into a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of red dots pulsed across the display, each one representing a human presence that the Council had never suspected existed. For the past 200 years, Su Yang began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. You believed humanity had become a peaceful species, focused on trade, exploration, and cultural exchange. You were half right. We did. Focus on those things, but not for the reasons you thought. The display zoomed in on the Zephyrian Collective's territory, showing shipping routes that crisscross their space like a spider web. Captain Hunjin Lee has been running cargo between your worlds for 30 years. The ships carry medical, supplies, rare minerals, and luxury goods. What you didn't know is that every single one of his vessels is equipped with sensor arrays more advanced than your own military scanners. A new image appeared, detailed schematics of Zephyrian defense platforms, complete with structural weaknesses and weapon specifications. The Collective's representatives made sounds like wind chimes in a hurricane, their harmonic voices filled with shock and outrage. Impossible. One of them transmitted. Our security protocols would have detected any scanning attempts. Su Yang smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Your security protocols detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. Captain Lee's real. Cargo was information. Every delivery mapped your defenses. Every trade route cataloged your military assets. Every friendly conversation with dock workers gathered intelligence on your fleet movements. The display shifted to show the ethereal domains. Those mysterious regions where the ancient energy beings conducted their incomprehensible research. Even here, red dots appeared like a rash across supposedly secure space. Artist Sionho Park has been staging cultural exhibitions throughout ethereal space for 50 years. His sculptures and installations have been praised as breakthrough examples of human creativity connecting with alien consciousness. Soyang's expression hardened. Each piece contained quantum sensors capable of monitoring dimensional fluctuations and energy patterns. We've been studying your most sacred sites, learning the secrets of your technology, and mapping vulnerabilities you didn't even know you had. When it spoke, reality itself seemed to bend around its words. This is ... unprecedented. Our domains exist partially outside normal space-time. No physical technology should be capable of. No conventional technology, Su Yang corrected. But humans have never been very good at accepting the word impossible. When we couldn't match your energy manipulation abilities, we found other ways. Park's quantum sensors don't exist in normal space-time either. They exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously, which is why your defenses never detected them. Chamber erupted in panic as species after species realized the implications. If humans could spy on the ethereals, no one was safe from their surveillance. Counselor Threxmer of the Dominion hegemony rose from his platform, his massive form towering over the assembly. This is fantasy. My people's fortress worlds are impregnable. We've never allowed human ships within 100 light-years of our core systems. The display obligingly showed him 300 different images of Dominion military installations, taken from angles that should have been impossible to achieve without triggering every alarm in their security networks. Explorer Jin Seo Kim has been conducting scientific surveys of stellar phenomena near your territory for 40 years. Su Yang explained. Her research into neutron star behavior required her to position sensor probes throughout your region of space. What she was really doing was identifying every weakness in your fortress world's shields, every blind spot in your sensor networks, every way to turn your own defenses against you. Threxmer's roar shook the chamber like an earthquake. Lies. Our sensor networks are absolute. Nothing moves in our space without our knowledge. Your sensor networks see what we want them to see, Su Yang replied calmly. Kim's probes exist in the shadow zones between your scanning frequencies. They've been watching you for decades, learning your patrol patterns, mapping your weapon emplacements, and finding ways to slip past defenses you thought were perfect. But the real shock came when the display pulled back to show the entire galaxy. The red dots weren't just scattered throughout alien space, they formed a web that connected every major trade route, every strategic system, every choke point that could control galactic commerce or military movement. This is our real network, Su Yang announced. Hidden shipyards inside asteroids that your sensors read as normal rock. Weapons platforms disguised as deep space research stations. Automated defense systems built into the very hyperspace routes you use for travel. We've been building a shadow infrastructure for 2 centuries. And you never noticed because you were looking for threats that matched your own technology. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the collective Queen Ode had stopped her bioluminescent pulsing, her massive form frozen in shock. "Impossible, High Arbiter," Velthera whispered, her translucent body flickering like a dying star. "Our sensors would have detected construction on this scale. The energy signatures alone would have your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect." A new voice interrupted. The air in the center of the chamber shimmered, and suddenly, Admiral Q-Man Lim stood there as a hologram. Her image so clear it seemed she was physically present. Every security system in the council chamber activated simultaneously. Trying to trace the transmission source, alarms wailed as the most advanced surveillance technology in the galaxy failed to locate the origin of her signal. For 2 centuries, Admiral Lim continued, ignoring the chaos around her. Humanity has been the galaxy's secret guardian. While you formed committees and held debates, we stopped 3 attempted invasions from dark space. We prevented the Andromedans from establishing a foothold in this galaxy. We quietly eliminated 17 different threats that would have consumed entire star systems. Our eyes swept the assembly, and every representative felt the weight of her gaze. We monitored threats you never knew existed. We fought wars in the shadows so you could sleep peacefully in your beds. We maintained galactic peace through strength you never realized we possessed. The hologram took a step forward, and somehow the simple movement seemed to fill the entire chamber with menace. But you chose to test us? To see what humanity would do when cornered? To treat us like children who had forgotten how to fight? Admiral Lim's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. Congratulations. Now you know what we've been hiding all along. We never stopped being warriors. We just learned to be invisible ones. The transmission flickered and died, leaving the council in stunned silence. The security systems continued, their futile attempts to trace a signal that had come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Slowly, the implications began to sink in. Humanity hadn't grown soft during their centuries of peace. They had simply become so good at hiding their true nature that even ancient species with millennia of experience had been completely fooled. The galaxy's most dangerous predators had been living among them all along, disguised as harmless prey. And now, for the first time in 2 centuries, the mask was coming off. High Arbiter Velthera's form flickered, rapidly as her consciousness struggled to process the revelation. Around the chamber, representatives began to realize that everything they thought they knew about galactic power structures had been an illusion. The humans had been watching them all along, learning their secrets, mapping their weaknesses, and preparing for a day they hoped would never come. That day had arrived, and the galaxy was about to discover what humanity looked like when they stopped pretending to be harmless. The moment came without warning, as the most significant moments in galactic history often do. Across every inhabited world, from the crystal spires of the core worlds to the mining stations on the outer rim, every communication device activated simultaneously. Television screens flickered to life in alien living rooms. Holographic displays materialized in busy marketplaces. Emergency broadcast systems overrode private channels and military frequencies alike. Even the most primitive radio receivers on backwater planets suddenly carried the same signal. The feat was impossible by any known technology. No species possessed the capability to coordinate a transmission across the entire galaxy, reaching trillions of devices at exactly the same moment. Yet it was happening. Fleet Admiral Namjoon Kong's weathered face appeared on every screen, his dark eyes carrying the weight of secrets that had been kept for over 2 centuries. He wore the simple blue uniform of the Human Exploration Service, not the military dress that might have been expected for such a moment. Behind him, the stars wheeled slowly, suggesting he was broadcasting from a ship somewhere in deep space. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his voice somehow carrying perfectly across. Communication systems designed for dozens of different species with incompatible audio processing. "My name is Fleet Admiral Namjoon Kong of the Human Defense Forces. For 237 years, humanity has chosen peace. On the Zephyrian homeworld, millions of translucent beings stopped their harmonic communications to listen. in the collective's biocities. Even the Queen nodes paused their endless coordination to focus on the impossible transmission. Across the Dominion's fortress worlds, warrior castes that had never shown interest in alien affairs found themselves riveted by the humans' calm words. "We turned our weapons into tools of exploration," Admiral Kong continued, his image crystal clear. "Despite the impossible distance it was traveling, our warships became vessels of discovery. Our soldiers became teachers and healers. We made this choice because we believed in something greater than ourselves, the promise of galactic civilization." As he spoke, space itself began to change. Around every major alien world above the Zephorian homeworld, the aurora-like lights that danced in their upper atmosphere suddenly dimmed as something massive blocked the starlight. The dreadnought Indomitable Will materialized from nothingness, its hull stretching for kilometers like a floating mountain of metal and purpose. The ship's design was unlike anything in current human fleets. Angular, predatory, built for war rather than exploration. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Above the collective's primary hive world, the carrier group Silent Thunder decloaked from stealth fields that had hidden them for decades. 6 massive vessels appeared in perfect formation, their flight bays already opening to reveal fighter squadrons that gleamed like deadly stars. The Dominion's proudest fortress world found itself suddenly sharing orbit with the battlecruiser Eternal Vigilance, a ship so heavily armed that its weapon systems alone massed more than most species' entire fleets. Around the ethereal domains, vessels that seemed to phase in and out of visible space demonstrated technology that shouldn't have existed. Hundreds of ships revealed themselves simultaneously across the galaxy, each one appearing exactly where it would have the maximum psychological impact. They weren't attacking, they were simply being seen for the first time in centuries. "We are not here to conquer," Admiral Kong's voice continued, his calm tone contrasting sharply with the panic spreading across alien communication networks. "We are here to remind you that we could have, at any time, for the past 2 centuries." On the bridge of the Indomitable Will, Captain Taeyong watched the Zephirian defense fleet scrambling to respond to his ship's sudden appearance. Their elegant crystalline vessels moved with practiced precision, but he could see the confusion in their formation patterns. They had no idea how to respond to a threat that had materialized from empty space. "Every defensive station, Admiral," Kong continued, "every fleet position, every military secret, we've known them all. We've been the shadows that watched over galactic peace, preventing conflicts before they could begin." The evidence was undeniable. Human ships appeared in positions that should have been impossible to reach without triggering every alarm in alien space. They sat calmly in the middle of supposedly impregnable defensive formations, their presence proof that no secret had been safe from human observation. On the Galactic Council Station, emergency sessions were being called as representatives tried to understand what was happening. But in the main chamber, Ambassador Jiwan Park stood once again before the assembly, her expression serene as chaos reigned around her. High Arbiter Valthara, as translucent form flickered, rapidly as she processed the implications of what she was seeing. The massive view screen in the chamber showed human ships positioned around dozens of alien worlds, their very presence rewriting everything the Council thought they knew about galactic power structures. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Threxmer, his massive form slumped in shock. "Our sensors, our defenses. ... How long have they been watching us?" "Since the beginning," Jawan replied simply. "Since the day we joined your galactic community, we've been learning everything there was to know about potential threats. Not because we wanted to attack you, but because we wanted to protect you from things you couldn't see coming." The transmission continued as Admiral Kong revealed the scope of humanity's hidden activities. They had prevented 17 different invasion attempts from outside the galaxy. They had quietly eliminated threats that would have consumed entire star systems. They had been fighting wars in the shadows while the rest of the galaxy debated policy in comfortable chambers. "But you chose to test us," Admiral Kong said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "To see what humanity would do when cornered. To treat us like children who had forgotten how to defend themselves." The image zoomed out to show the Admiral standing on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by officers whose faces reflected the same quiet competence. Behind them, tactical displays showed the positions of human forces throughout the galaxy, forces that had been invisible until this moment. "We hoped it would never come to this," he continued. "We hoped you would remember that we chose peace, not because we were weak, but because we were strong enough to make that choice. We hoped you would understand that the most dangerous predator is the one that chooses not to hunt." The demonstration reached its climax as human ships across the galaxy began coordinated maneuvers. They moved with precision that defied physics, appearing and disappearing as their stealth systems activated and deactivated in perfect synchronization. The message was clear. This was just a fraction of what humanity could accomplish when they stopped hiding their capabilities. On the Council Station, the vote to rescind the restrictions was unanimous and immediate. "High Arbiter," Velthera's voice shook as she spoke. "The restrictions are hereby lifted. The Council acknowledges that we may have profoundly misunderstood human capabilities." Guan nodded graciously, her diplomatic training serving her well even in this unprecedented moment. "We didn't want to remind you what we could do," she said, her words echoing Admiral Kong's message. "We hoped you'd remember why you should never make us choose between peace and survival." As the transmission ended and human ships began fading back into their hidden positions, the galaxy settled into a new reality. The balance of power hadn't changed. It had simply been revealed. Humanity had been the galaxy's secret guardians all along, protecting a civilization that had forgotten who was really keeping them safe in the days that followed. Diplomatic channels buzzed with frantic communications as species tried to understand the new reality. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Defense pacts were quietly revised. And in the deepest archives of every major civilization, new files were created to ensure that future generations would never again forget what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. The humans had made their point with typical efficiency. They were exactly as peaceful as they chose to be, and exactly as dangerous as they needed to be. The galaxy had been reminded that some sleeping giants should never be awakened, and that the most terrifying warriors were the ones who chose not to fight. Peace returned to the galaxy. But it was a different kind of peace now, one built on understanding rather than ignorance, on respect rather than dismissal. Humanity had shown their true face to the stars. The stars had learned to look upon it with the reverence it deserved. The lesson was complete, and the galaxy would not soon forget it. The end.